All right. Thank you, people, for joining us. This is the last in the Stanmore Academy, and we're very privileged and happy to welcome Karen Harris with us. So I think we've sent around elements of bio and information, but for those who don't know, Karen is a female entrepreneur who's built and sold 3 businesses, as well as a trustee, volunteer, wife, mother, and grandmother. Who hopes to be visiting the grandchild.
Best bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I might add, a thoroughly nice person, which I think is the best bit. Fine. I mean, look, let's start with this. Like, Karen was also, I should add, the former managing director of Intu Digital. Intu clearly have been in the news recently. I think we'll get onto that maybe towards the second section or towards the end. I guess let's start, tell us a little bit about your personal journey. Where did it start, and where's it up to?
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, everybody. Lovely to be with the Stanmore crew instead of the Woodside Park crew, although it's lovely to be with them too. So I start kind of from the beginning. I did a law degree, and it was completely strategic because I just thought, well, if when I apply for business jobs in the days when there were graduate jobs, and people saw that I had a law degree, they'd think I was really clever, which of course it does not. They're not the same thing. So I did my law degree, got my 2-1, applied for the graduate jobs, and went to work for a big marketing agency. And literally went through the hierarchy, went to an even bigger marketing agency, and lived that kind of agency life. And then one day, the guy who I worked for in this big agency approached me and said, I'm looking to set up my own business. I want you to come with me. And I was single at the time, young, really naive. And we had a coffee and we had that very important equity conversation. And because I was so young and naive, I really didn't understand at all the value of what equity was. So we had this incredible conversation where he was really, really nervous, and I couldn't understand why he was so nervous. And he was asking me how much I wanted, to which I was responding, I want to be able to work from home because one day I want to have kids, and so I want to work from home. And the shock on his face, it was completely and utterly floored, because he thought this was going to be some kind of like deep negotiation about equity. And he just couldn't believe that we were having this conversation. He was like, yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's great. You can work from home. And remember, working from home now is the norm, but then it was far from the norm. And so that was basically it. And literally the next year, so I left with a colleague and him, and we took our clients with, and the next year I was married and having a baby, as Jewish girls do. And, I was obviously off. And when Hannah was 3 months old, I got the call. And he called me to say, oh, great, you've had a baby, fantastic, when are you coming back into the office? And I was basically, oh, do you remember our conversation where I was going to work from home? And he was like, yeah, but I mean, and I said, well, you know what, let's see how it goes. I'll start working from home and we'll see how it goes for another month. And literally he never called me again, because the next month I was more profitable from home than I had ever been in the office. I think they say that when you have a new baby, it brings blessings. And it just happened that my clients were doing really well, and we happened to win a big pitch. And so basically he just never asked me to go back into the office. And, I look back at that conversation and I can't quite believe how all this happened. And then Jacob was born kind of 18 months later. And my clients were very, very different to the clients that were in the main office. So my clients were big government departments, and we launched self-assessment for the Inland Revenue. We did huge education campaigns for the Department of Education. So campaigns like Every Lesson Counts to make sure that parents didn't take their children on a holiday during term time, accounts like Aim Higher, when 5% of people went to university, and it was the Tony Blair days when he wanted 50% to go to university. So that was the sort of work we were doing, and the office was doing very much kind of fast-moving consumer goods, Quaker Oats, Felix, cat food, all of that kind of stuff. So we really were almost two different businesses, but you know, I never really thought about things in those terms. And then I got the call, and my boss called me, and he said, hey, Karen, why don't we set up another company? So the main agency was called Geronimo Marketing. Why don't we set up Geronimo PR? Because my clients had started to go in that direction. We'd won a big government PR contract, and you can have 50-50. So we were back to this. I mean, Hashem works in amazing ways. We were back to this equity conversation a few years later. By then, obviously, I was married to a corporate lawyer who, so I was significantly less naive, let's put it that way, and he ended up with 15%, which did make him a few million, so he was happy in the end. But at the time, 15% was a good deal, I thought, that we'd struck. So then I was running Geronimo PR, and it became the fastest growing PR agency in the UK for 2 consecutive years. And I ended up selling it to a large management consultancy group that specialised in the public sector called Tribal Group. Moved into their offices in London, and my bit had 110 people with 3 different offices in Scotland and Wales and England. And then I stayed there for another 4.5 years. After that, I left. I became a non-exec chairman of a broadcast digital business. And I was a non-exec chairman on behalf of a private equity company that had bought half of that business. And lots of pain during that. We restructured that whole business, brought new people in, did various things, and sold it to The Economist after 3 years. Then I was sitting at home, and I had a little bit of time off, and I just loved e-commerce. I loved the whole idea of it. And I just thought, do you know what? I really want to set up a business around online shopping. I just think it's going to be the future. And this was 10 years ago, I'm thinking now. So
how old were the kids at that point?
The kids were, so by this time I've got 4 kids, and I'm just trying to think how old the youngest was. 8, something like that was the youngest. So I hired a developer, a computer engineer, freelance, and we sort of sat at my kitchen table, and we built a website, and it was called Style Me TV, and the concept was we would show 30-second films of models wearing a blend of high street retailers, so a Topshop top, a Zara skirt, a River Island shoes, something like that, and you would be able to click the show and buy everything in one basket, one checkout. So now when we've got Instagram and we can do these things, you know, it doesn't seem that big a deal. But 10 years ago, believe me, it was a big deal. So we were shooting 10 shows a day in my house. The kids would come home from school, and the sort of boys would walk in, and there'd be models laying all over the floor, and they'd be sort of stepping over them to get up to their rooms to do their homework. So yeah, it was an interesting time. And after a couple of years of that, I sold that business to Intu shopping centres. And then I did an earn out with them for 3.5 years, and then stayed for another 3 years. And I left end of June last year. So that's kind of bringing us all the way up to date to where we are now.
Wow. Oh, goodness. Wow. That's quite a journey. I forgot to ask at the beginning, where are you from originally?
I am from Leeds.
I thought I heard North, but not Mancunian.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm from Leeds. I'm not a Londoner.
We have a few Leeds people.
A long time.
Right. Okay. We have a few Leeds people here. Hi. Great. Wow. Okay. Goodness me. Okay. So then, and then since Intu.
So since Intu, I've been having a bit of I've been telling people, I've been switching between our second retired and I'm having a sabbatical. So I started to work on a new business concept in the health and wellbeing tech sector after I left Intu, and a few hours a day. And I'm very excited about that, but the technology that I need hasn't been developed yet. So, but it's close-ish. So I think I'm about a year away from that business. And then I had obviously the grandchild, and I had an operation in January, and then I had the dreaded COVID, which took me out for 6 weeks. But yeah, so it's I do really want to do something again. It's just a matter of what and when. Well, if I can do the health tech business, then I'll do that one.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. I think a couple of things in common with Schulz, really needing better technology and pining for a sabbatical. I think I could.
Well, it's funny. I'm actually doing a lot of volunteering at the moment, and I'm helping Woodside Park with their digital strategy.
Amazing.
So we've actually just put in some new technology. The rabbi is already saying, "Oh, you've got to give this to all the other schools. It's amazing. It's amazing." So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Any secrets you can share?
Not that you'd want to talk about now, but I can tell you afterwards. Just a fantastic project management tool which does everything for you, which makes your office, I don't know what your office is like, but obviously you have limited hours, limited staff. It just makes them a million times more efficient. Amazing. So you get a lot more done. Yeah.
Great. Okay, amazing. I guess in terms of influencers, that's quite a career and it's spanned quite a few years. What do you say the biggest influences have been?
My biggest influences, like I'm sure we'll all say the same thing as us Jews, but 100,000,000% my parents. Particularly my mum, actually, who's no longer with us, but she was an Egyptian refugee, and she came to the country when she was 5, and she was brought up by Norwood, actually, with her 2 sisters, and she met my dad at 19, and he sort of married her and took her from foster home to his home, and together they built a little business and then a factory in Barnsley where I spent every single school holiday. In fact, they used to joke about when I was born, literally day 2, my mum was back on the factory floor and I was in the pram in the factory in the office, and they just open the door and shout, "Mrs. Green, your baby's crying," and she'd have to come in and feed me, and that was basically it. So somehow this whole business thing must have happened by osmosis. But all 3 of us are, my other siblings, my 2 other siblings, we've all gone into business, and they've been miles more successful than me. So my parents obviously got something across. I don't know what, but they did.
Wow.
DNA, yeah.
That's fascinating. It's amazing how many. I've just seen how successful people came from very, very hardworking people, especially hardworking people who moved country.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I think working hard is in my DNA. And, I think what I would say is there's a kind of negative to it as well, in that I have this refugee mentality. Like, I genuinely believe that I'll have no food tomorrow. Like, I don't know why, but I live that all the time, that you have to be so grateful because everything could go. Right. And it's that whole mentality. Yeah.
I remember in the days we had kiddishes, there were certainly some people who looked like that mentality as well. We'll cut that out the recording. Okay, let's move on a little bit. I've noticed, as a rabbi, we're supposed to pick these things up. I've noticed the word Hashem has come up twice already.
All right. Sorry.
I'm chalking them off. Don't worry. I'm playing interview bingo over here with the words we want to hear. Right. How has faith affected those business relationships? Where does faith sit in general, and especially within business and relationships?
So we became Shomrei Shabbat about when I was building the Geronimo PR business from home, and we never called it Shomrei Shabbat at first. We called it a family day. That's right. And we did it because both my husband and I were working full time. We had young kids. And instead of him going to football and me going to Red Cross, we just wanted to make sure we could lock down, for want of a better word, together. And, at first it was really gradual. At first we'd like take the kids to the children's service at Shawl, and then we'd get in the car and go to friends for tea. And then we dropped the car, and then I used to make dinner, and we'd watch films, and then we dropped the dinner, we dropped making cooking, and then we dropped the films, and bit by bit we ended up becoming properly Shomrei Shabbat. And honestly, my saviour, I think my husband would say exactly the same, completely our anchor, a sanctuary, and really freedom from slavery is how I would describe it. Because when you're working like that, and I know I told that story quite quickly, the reality of that story was there was a hell of a lot of all-nighters and aggro and hard work, and these things don't just happen. So it was a kind of 24/6 job, and having Shabbat to not be connected to email or phone or whatever was literally, to be honest, I don't think I would have achieved what I had achieved if I didn't have that. And also I don't think our family would have been as close if we hadn't have had Shabbat.
Wow. And did the business respect that?
Well, when you're running your own business, they kind of have to.
Okay.
That's the way it is. But yeah, I mean, when I'd sold businesses and had to do an earn out, my husband would always negotiate the contracts on the sale, and it was absolutely a core piece of any of the sale negotiations that we did, that I would not work on a Friday and not work so I had the whole of Friday off, and I wouldn't work on a Shabbat. And that was in writing. And if you negotiate these things up front, there's never an issue because they want to buy the business anyway. So yeah, and to be honest, I would work as a Motzi Shabbos, I would work Sundays. It was never detrimental in terms of my work in any way, shape or form. I mean, sometimes, when you have a series of Yontovs coming up in the autumn, I'm sure all of us working people think, gosh, what on earth do people think when you say, oh, I've got nothing, I've got another holiday. Yeah, sometimes that's a bit tricky, but it was never detrimental.
Amazing. Beautiful. Okay, I guess let's move on to some of the other topics. Let's move towards women in general. Is it difficult for women in business? Any difficult experiences? Women running a company, owning a company. How was that?
So for me, I mean, it's a bit of a yes and no answer. It's yes, it was difficult at times when I was working in bigger companies. So when I wasn't the boss, basically. So as a female entrepreneur, from that perspective, it was easy because you set the culture. You were able to ensure that inherent biases just weren't a thing, because if your leadership was that didn't exist in the culture, then it just didn't exist in the culture. But there were occasions, particularly when a small example, and you can never really put your finger on it, but when I was working at Geronimo Marketing, so before I set up the separate part, there was a male colleague who liked to take credit for a lot of my work, but consistently, like not just once or twice, like all the time. And that in itself wasn't the bad thing. The bad thing was the boss believed him. That was the bad thing. And they'd have a drink together down the pub, and Bob's your uncle. So it didn't massively harm me, because although actually it did affect one bonus at one point, but overall it didn't, because at the end of the day I ended up with my own business out of it, and it sort of grew exponentially. So, it made their business look small in the end. So it didn't matter. But yeah, I think in big companies, it's there often, but you can't necessarily put your finger on it and identify it. It's kind of just sort of just there, niggling away.
Beneath the surface, I get that.
Yeah.
So
That's why I really promote female entrepreneurs. I really do, because I just think women are so, they have so many brilliant qualities for running businesses. I sound sexist saying that, because I'm sure there's a lot of amazing men who do, but just in terms of women who are scared of stepping up to the plate, that they shouldn't be. You don't have to develop male traits to be a business person. You can be very feminine, you can be very supportive and empathetic and caring and all of those things, and you do well with that culture, you do better with that culture. So yeah, that's something.
How did you deal with that situation, out of interest? The guy who kept stealing your thunder, so to speak.
Oh, I was absolutely pathetic. I was really young. I had a meeting with my boss and cried.
Really? Oh my gosh. Wow. How did he take that?
I was so shocked. I just couldn't believe it. And I just so shocked that he would believe that.
Mm-hmm.
That I was so sad. I just actually cried in his office. Didn't make him blinding. But years later, he actually said to me, he brought it up and said to me, I cannot believe I believed all of that. He said that to me. I'd forgotten it.
Really? I bet, can I just do a bit of the old counselling or therapy kind of thing over here? I bet, were you brought up in a really, really honest home?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, open, very open.
You like honest, hardworking, etc. I think that's often what happens. I think people who are brought up with a very straight, honest home, when they see dishonesty or people swindling, lack of trust, etc., I think it grates on them even more. And I've seen it myself. I think either way, gosh, wow, it's amazing he remembered it.
I know, because clearly, it all, actions speak louder than words, and it all worked out in one particular way. And so it must have grated on him, because actually he's a really good person, and he's a lovely man. And I just think he must have been really disappointed with himself that he believed it.
Yeah. What happened to the other guy?
Not much.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not
always close to that big deal, but never quite getting it.
Thank God that's not one of the stories that ends off with you saying you married him in the end.
As well, but anyway, whatever it is.
Right. Wow. Okay. In terms of, I guess, advice to female entrepreneurs, you started off by saying, don't fear, use feminine traits, those kind of things. If they do face, I guess, beneath the surface, I don't know, sexism or anti-women sentiments, what's your advice in that? Do they need to have their antennas out looking for it, or? I
think if it's women in business, or female entrepreneurs, I think those are, well, they can be two different things. I think it can be easier for a female entrepreneur. Interestingly, I think the world has changed. I mentor 3 women at the moment, one who works for Google and one who works for BT, and they both of those, that is not even anywhere close to being near their agenda. They don't even think about it, because both of those environments, it just does not exist. The culture there doesn't exist. So it's interesting, I think, how things have changed, but probably not everywhere. Look, my overall advice to people, particularly women, because there's so much on your plate, that it's really important to be able to compartmentalize your life and to ensure that you have balance. And I'll always remember my brother coming into my little office when I was running Geronimo PR, really in the early days. And he walked into my desk and he picked up like a child's party invitation, and underneath that was a letter from number 10 Downing Street for an event that we were doing there. And he picked them both up and he looked at me and he said, "These two sum you up in one go." And you know, I think if you have the ability to really see each element in compartments and you can put your whole self in each bit, you get this balance, because work is never ever more important than your family life, ever. And as soon as you get close to that, leave. You know, it must be over. The other thing is that I always say to people, which is very common, is surround yourself with people who are miles more talented than yourself, which is my success, that I was very good at hiring real people who were better than me, and you know, hence the success. Always be able to kind of visualize what's great, know what it looks like, and I always say never make the mistake of loving your product. You have to love your customer. If you love your customer, then the product will work, or the service, or whatever it is that you're doing. But if you just love your service or product, huge mistake.
Wow.
There's a few tidbits.
Okay, great. That's really good, right? Especially the compartmentalizing and be able to, you know, different compartments. I guess also at the same time being able to unify them. I think what you said before about faith, you know, that is effectively a unifying factor. You've got your general goal, and that is, if you like, surrounded by faith, or that is faith, the truth is. And then you've got your different parts of it, my family life, my work life, but it all comes back, you know, in a certain sense to a unified whole. We do shopping.
Can we do shopping?
Shopping, yeah, that's right.
Hey,
what are your bargain tips at the moment? No. In terms of future of shopping, like Intu are not in the best place. It seems like, at least, from my thorough research of a BBC website article.
BBC News.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. What do you think the future holds? I guess for them, but in general, shopping. You know, what's shopping going to look like? You know, 5, 10, well, not minutes, but months, years down the line. Where are we heading, do you think?
So look, I mean, I think these exceptional circumstances with COVID, what that's done is kind of sped up where we were going to be anyway in 5 years' time. So, you know, what are we seeing? We're obviously seeing the massive growth of online sales.
If you say that Brent Cross is at risk of closing down, my mother will have a heart attack. So please go slow on anything, anything in that area.
Can I tell you, I'm actually still a fan, even though my life's been on the digital side. I still believe that people will want to shop in a physical environment. And, you know, whilst we have got this massive explosion of online, you know, people don't realise that we are still only 15%. If you take out food shopping, we're still only 15% of sales are online. Right. Now that is massively growing, and it was predicted by 2025 to be about 25%. That's been brought forward and is being brought forward. No one quite knows the real number at the moment because of the situation that we're in. But it's still not the majority. And, you know, if I ask my kids, you know, what percentage of shopping do you think is online? They say 90%, but it isn't actually true. So look, it is growing. Mobile shopping, i.e. shopping on your mobile phone, is huge. I mean, 73% of all shopping, online shopping, is on a mobile phone now. And that is driven by, you know, the other trend, which is the growth of sales through social media. So you've got Instagram, you've got Facebook, you've got TikTok, and all of those platforms have got e-commerce features. So buy buttons, you know, shops, and then you can blend that with influencers, and it becomes a real place of inspiration. So you can literally lay in bed and you know, all of a sudden you're looking at somebody who's subtly selling you something that you never knew you wanted. You didn't want it, by the way, and you still don't want it when you get it, but it's really easy to press buy and click on Apple Pay, and that's it. It turns up the next day. Absolutely marvelous. So all of those things are working together, and I think that is supported by artificial intelligence, which is the thing that is making it so successful, because what you start to get with online shopping is this whole personalized experience. So all of a sudden it knows what you like, it knows what you've looked at before, it can make recommendations based on all of those preferences, it knows if you're female or male, it knows the size that you are, it can automate pricing depending on market, it can automate sales for you. You know, all of that stuff is just making it easier, more convenient, more instant. So yeah, so I think, in summary, more growth of e-commerce primarily through mobile phone and social media networks driven by AR. Little bit of voice, that's supposedly one of the big trends. I'm not convinced that voice through smart home and smart you know, devices in the home, I think that is growing massively for, you know, can you tell me the news or tell me the weather or play a game with it or turn on the lights? Absolutely, fantastic. Will it ever become the main point of shopping? Don't think so. But it's definitely in the mix of what people are buying. But I do still think that physical retail will exist, but it will exist in a slightly different way. So I think it will end up being much more threaded through experiences that we are having, whether that's where we live. Maybe we'll be living more in villages, which incorporate entertainment, and certainly, you know, young millennials who, you know, can't afford to get onto the property ladder. I mean, I was always saying to Intu, we need to be building shopping villages. We need to be literally showing the future and turning the entire centre into a centre for millennials with, you know, amazing apartments that are affordable, that have click and collect, that have WeWork and all their offices there, that have their cinemas and their VR places and their urban farm, and you create a village for young people, and shopping would exist through that. And young people always drive trends. So that was where I was coming at it from. So we'll see how it turns out, but you'll definitely be able to still go in a shop at some point.
Right, correct. Right, yeah, you're right. I guess also the difference between old and young. The trend surely must be that the older people still want the physical shops. Although I guess now that less of them can go out to them, I guess in this current juncture. And then you're right, definitely the younger people, digital things. Is there anything coming after the mobile phone? Apart from the voice, maybe?
Well, look, I mean, there's been loads of talk, and I did a lot of work with virtual reality and with augmented reality or mixed reality. And the truth is, so augmented reality is where you can, I don't know if you've used Snapchat, where you can create faces that make you look prettier, or it puts a hat on you, or things that aren't really there, and so it augments the real picture that you see. That, interestingly enough, has come into e-commerce, particularly in the beauty sector. So you can now go on a beauty website like L'Oreal, and you can put on a lipstick. So it will turn your camera on a bit like you're looking at Zoom now, and it will have a palette of lipsticks, and you can click on it, and it will literally trace your mouth and put the colour on, so you're effectively trying it virtually. So that's interesting. Mixed reality is where you wear these glasses and you see the real world, but digital elements within it. And that was always the kind of big thing that was going to explode in the future. But it hasn't actually exploded because nobody wants to wear the glasses. But the technology is absolutely amazing. Like when you wear the glasses, it's honestly, for gaming, it's incredible. You can have robots that hide behind your sofa and they're not there, and you can shoot them. I mean, it's the most fun out of everything. But will it be a real world application? Probably not.
Right. Wow.
Not yet, then.
That's right.
Not it's contact lenses.
Great. Okay, let's do one last segment, and then I don't know if you're happy to take a couple of questions that people have. I know you've also got all your voluntary work that you've been doing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know you've got a lot of amazing volunteers in your shawl, Kahila, I know that. I know the wonderful Ilana Metzger is doing amazing things for WITSO. But yeah, I was a trustee of UJA for 9 years, and I'm currently a trustee for Jewish Futures, and that's kind of the biggest charity that no one's ever heard of. And they've not heard of it because they've heard of the brands, not the umbrella brand. And the brands are like Gift and Aish and J Roots, FJL, those organisations. So yeah, I'm currently a trustee there, and do a lot of work, particularly with doing talks for the younger, young professionals in trying to help them. And then more recently, I've sort of thrown myself into Woodside Park and the community, and because of the whole COVID situation, it was kind of like, wow, we do have some really vulnerable people within our community. Plus, we've got 177 over 80s at Woodside Park. I mean, it's a significant number. And, at the point where people over 70 effectively were in, and, we had to quickly find out who needed help. We set up a buddy system. We had 100 volunteers come forward. We buddied up people so they had somebody to look after, i.e. calls every week, whether they needed their shopping done or whatever it was. And then we separately set up a road crew on a WhatsApp group of 35 young people who were non-isolating and just wanted to get out and drive, any old excuse to get out and drive. So we would post jobs on the WhatsApp group, and we've literally done hundreds of jobs, and they would pick it up and say, yeah, I'll go and pick up Mrs. Smith's prescription and this chemist and drop it outside her door, or full-blown shopping. And literally we are still doing that at the moment, and we did obviously things like the Shabbat box with the United Synagogue, and now we've created our own since that stopped, and we deliver that every week. We get sponsors for it, and etc. And I think it's really interesting because I've always been involved in kind of bigger charities and big business, and whilst I've sort of gone to shul, I've never actually been massively involved in doing stuff with the community, and honestly, it's been the most fulfilling thing that I've done. I've got my own buddy, a wonderful almost 90-year-old whose whole family are in America, and literally she's like the queen, this woman. She dresses herself and she looks amazing, and yeah, so I see her minimum twice a week. And it's the most rewarding, and it's helped me see how to reposition shuls. I don't know about Stanmore, but we've got 1,400 members, and 200 of those come every week. They're our loyal members. That leaves a lot of people who don't come. So and most of those are once or twice a year-ish. Some of them never come. And with all the voluntary work and everything that we've been doing, you hear people who were non-shul goers say, wow, we've got such an amazing community. And, I think that's the point. We need to reposition the words in a way. I know we are a shul, but what does a synagogue represent in people's minds? It for so many people, it means a male-led service. And if you don't read Hebrew or can't pray, or you don't know what's going on, then you're out. You're isolated. But when you talk about a community and gifting and Chabad style outreach and just being there for each other, even if obviously the shul needs to be the core of that and the rabbi and rebbetzin, that changes everything. Then all of a sudden you've got 1,400 members who are engaged. So that's the kind of work that we're doing at the moment.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah, I mean, I try as much as possible to use community instead of shul. I think you're right. It sounds much more inclusive, and it means there's much more to, than 3-4 hours Shabbos morning or whatever. And do you think COVID long term is going to affect community shuls? Where do you see that going?
I mean, who knows? Look, I think we can only learn, and one of the hardest things that we've found with a shul, and I'm sure it must be the same with all shuls, is how do you engage your kind of young professional audience? Like, my boys are 21 and 20, nearly 24, and shul, no chance. My girls are religious, but not my boys, funnily enough. Send your children to Jewish schools, that's what I say. And you won't end up with my problem. But, when it came to the road crew and picking up and dropping off at people's homes to help them because they were vulnerable, they're the first to volunteer. And all of a sudden, you've got this young audience helping your more seniors, and then you've got your community back. And so now we're saying, when our young people go off to university, we need to be getting them back on the road crew when they get home and saying how much we need them. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen with COVID? Is it going to get weaker? Is it just going to become accepted like flu? I don't know. I do know that the economy. So a lot of the people that I've seen, I mean, obviously it's difficult because of all the people at Intu who got made redundant, but there's going to be a year of hardship for a lot of people until the market readjusts and the new jobs are created. So I'm not sure whether the country can ever afford to lock down completely again. Who knows? We'll see.
Wow. Okay. I guess, look, firstly, thank you very much. If anyone does want to put any questions, either you can ask personally to unmute yourself or just put it in the chat, then just feel free. It's interesting that you were saying about the young professionals. We have similar. I thought we didn't actually have many young professionals in the community. We did a bit of a search of the database, and just living in the area, we've got about 80 or so.
Wow.
Which is quite sizable, but you're right, for that demographic, often, if you've come to shul as a teenager, you'll come until you're 18, let's say. If you come, then you're almost off the map until often you get married, and even then you're off the map until you have a child.
Absolutely.
So we find there's like a 10-11 year gap sometimes. Which is
and that's the interesting thing, because you were talking about what's actually going to happen to shul. So everyone's gone online, everyone's been doing Zoom sessions like these. Your program that's brilliant that you've been running, they've been doing Facebook Live and YouTube, and our strategy is very much that we are now going to have 3 pillars, where pillar 1 is our chesed pillar, which is all our real people giving and connecting young and old and gifting and all that stuff. The second pillar is online, so continuing and upping the ante with all the online programs. And the third is Woodside Park Live, which is all the live events and shul services. So the difference there is strengthening what we do on the chesed side and the community side, but also keeping and upping what we do on the online, because the online halo is really, really important, because that reaches beyond our regulars. And the good thing about that is if young professionals or young people in particular, it's all about social for them. So they might not want to mix with just the people in Woodside Park, but if you start linking up all the shuls, then it's much more interesting.
Right.
So I think there'll be a lot more collaboration between shuls, and there should be. There really should be.
Right, I hear that. That's correct, totally correct. Okay, Jeremy's got a question or two. Again, if anyone has anything from just what we've covered entrepreneurship, female entrepreneurship, difficulties in the workplace, shopping, faith and Shabbat, personal life, family life, actually covered quite a lot. Thanks, Karen. And for those who logged in a bit early, we talked about whether or not either of us are going to be able to fly to Israel in the summer. Well, I don't think any of us can take any questions on that. Right, Jeremy, go for it.
Karen, always nice to see you. I've known, I think we met maybe 25 years ago. A long time ago, probably when I had a bit more hair, I suspect.
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Always nice to catch up and listen to your story. I'm going to make one comment and then ask you a question. I mean, the comment you made about, and I don't know if you know, but I'm chair of Stanmore, so I better own up to where I'm coming from first before I say what I'm about to say. What you said about synagogues, it rings, for me personally, rings incredibly true, because the historic notion of what a synagogue is, it is just there as a place of prayer. And clearly in 2020, even before that, the synagogue should be seen as much more than a place of prayer. It should be a place of community and a communal hub. And it should be, you know, a place where people can go from as well as go to, and not just the prayer is one part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that. The question for me was, you know, and I loved the story, and I knew the story about your journey to Shomrei Shabbat status. What do you do aside? Let's ignore what I say, sort of Shabbat time, which is as I've said to some of my fellow honorary officers over the last 3 months, particularly, is that thank God for Shabbat. Whoever invented Shabbat, you know, thank God for that, because you know it literally is without that, I'm not sure I'd have coped in truth with coronavirus. But what do you do aside from Shabbat with the downtime? What do you do in your spare time?
What, right now?
Well, just generally, we like to switch off from what I would say proper full-on work mode and family time. What do you you know?
At the moment, my life,
dance, play the piano, and what
yeah,
do you do?
my life consists of exercise. I go running or in the gym most days. Charity work, where I've just talked to you about all the Woodside Park, including designing all the posters. My newfound skill. I'm the new graphic designer. Don't know how I got that role. Redesign their emails. It's not even my background, but anyway. Yeah. So look, I feel that I'm a creative at heart. So anything I can do, whether that's even in the kitchen, creating things. I make a mean granola, by the way, just to let you know. No sugar, no oil. But yeah, anything creative, creating stuff, that's my passion. That's what I really love to do.
Brilliant. Lovely. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too. And thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Best to Andrew as well.
Oh, thank you. I'll tell him.
Great. Okay. All right. I just thank you again, Karen. We really appreciate it. And look, hope everyone as well. Hope Woodside Park continues to do fantastic work. We hear a lot of good things about them. And the regards to the family.
We should collaborate more.
Yeah, we should do. You're right. We 100% should do. And regards
to online events calendar, you should do some of the stuff with us. We've got some good things coming up.
That's a good idea.
I'm sure you have as well. We can do some of them with you.
Have to compare notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.